What is up, guys? Welcome back to the podcast. My name is Chadwick Baum, and for those of you who don't know, this is a little something I like to call my podcast.
You're listening to the Chadwick Baum Podcast.
What is up, guys? Welcome back. Today we are diving into part 2 with Sam. It's going to start right where the last video ended. Now, guys, the reason I am doing this podcast episode in the first place is what I'm about to show you. So what this podcast is going to be talking about today, transgender rights and Pride Month. The reason we are even bringing this up is because there was a sermon done in one of my local churches. I wanted to bring my friend Sam on, who is also trans, and watch the video with me and really talk about our personal thoughts on the video. We thought there was a lot of inconsistencies with the information that was provided, and out of respect and confidentiality of the church and the person giving the sermon, I have blurred them out and I have changed their voice. That way, this person is not targeted, because that's not what I want. I don't want this person targeted. I don't want this person hurt. I'm not out here trying to start wars with anybody. This is simply just an informational podcast, and we are just trying to educate people on the information we feel wasn't given properly within this sermon, and we really just want to educate people more on the LGBTQ. We're trying to educate people on the inconsistencies within this sermon and trying to make some of these things more aware so that people can further be educated on this topic. So without further ado, guys, here's the podcast. Enjoy.
So this morning I want to talk about the issue of identity. It's become quite the issue lately with the rise of transgenderism. It's made it all about pronouns and Pride Month.
So the first thing I wrote down is how they mentioned that this is fairly new.
Yeah, well, they call any alternative lifestyle new, like being gay is apparently new. It's not.
No, it's not new. And trans people have been around as far as 1728.
Yeah.
And I mean, that's just the first recorded.
Right.
There was probably even before that.
Yeah, I was doing a little bit of research about like iconic trans figures like back in the day before they could actually transition.
Mm-hmm.
And I actually stumbled upon the Mulan is actually based on a female to male transgender person.
Oh, really? I did not know that. But yeah, like the fact to say that they haven't been around, like...
It's fairly new.
Yeah, like this is fairly new. They haven't been around that long.
Or even just like they're trying to hint at its like mainstream. Like
right.
It's trendy to do this.
Right. I mean, it's been coming up in the shadows for a while now. It's just more accepted.
Well, and I think the main reason like why they're seeing it now is because our culture is becoming more online.
Mm-hmm.
So it's more available to people to see.
Yeah, it's definitely more available for people to see it.
It's not as easy to ignore.
Right. Yeah. And it's like, yeah, there's some craziness with it being all over, and people are just like think it's being pushed on them.
Yeah.
But it's not being pushed on them. It's just making it more aware.
It's just a part of life now.
Yeah. And the crazy thing is like, I like it when kids are so like curious and they want to know more about it.
Mm-hmm.
But it drives me nuts when their parents are like, no, you are not allowed to learn about that.
Yeah.
And it's like, why not? Like, Who cares? They may not want to be in that lifestyle. That's totally fine. But at least they have the knowledge about it.
Well, and just shutting them down like that's going to make them more curious.
Yeah, right. And I feel like if we had more knowledge for the youth about it, there would be less hate.
Right. Yeah.
Because they're knowledgeable about it. They may not support it, which is fine, but at least they know about it.
Right.
And can be like, hey, I like you as a person, even though I don't support it.
Right, yeah.
There needs to be more of that, I think.
All that kind of stuff. And even though the trans issue is quite new, this struggle with identity has been around for a long time because it's at the core of our beliefs. It's how we perceive the world. It's very central to the human experience. Each individual is important and created for a purpose, meant to express God's image in a unique way. There may be people in this room who are struggling with these issues.
I wrote down what they said was each individual is important and created for a purpose, meant to express God's image in a unique way. Like, I feel like that's what we're doing.
Right. Yeah.
Like, we're expressing ourselves in a
Being
unique way.
Yeah, exactly.
And they always try to shut us down by saying, "Oh no, you weren't born this way."
Yeah.
Well, God made me. Why? What makes
Right.
you think I wasn't born this way?
Right. Exactly.
It's kind of like that comment they always make where they say, "Love is love."
Mm-hmm.
And it's like, well, if you guys can love people like the Bible says,
Right.
how come you can't love people like us?
Well, and that includes us.
Right. Is there a little tiny fine print that says,
So
"Oh,
you're
love
just-
everybody,
yeah,
but not those
you're
gays"?
just picking and choosing
Right.
who you want to love.
Right.
Yeah.
And I do like that there's people in my life, or friends of mine who are Christian, that are like, "Hey, listen, we don't support your lifestyle, but we love you as a
Right.
person, and we're going to be here for you if you need anything." And I said, I appreciate that you can be like that.
I think it's interesting that they say they don't support it, because like you can be supportive and not agree with something.
Right.
And you can
exactly.
support someone and still not agree with what they're
Right.
doing.
And yeah.
But you can still support them.
Right.
Like, we've got this super good friend who's like, he's older and he's super, he's conservative.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I guess he'd be more independent now.
Right.
But when we first met him, he was very conservative, and he still
okay.
more leans conservative. But he knows about my transition, and he knows about everything with Kat being like non-binary, and he'll sit there and he'll ask you all the questions in the world, and
Yeah.
he'll support you. But it's not his life to live, it's not
Right.
the way he wants to live his life.
Mm-hmm.
And he's said that to us. Like,
Yeah.
I support what you're doing, and I love you guys. I don't always understand it, but I still support you, but it's just not my way of living.
Right. Yeah, for sure. I totally get that. There's people exactly like that in my life. Yeah, they're always interested to hear about it and want to know certain things about it. Like when I came out to one of my Christian friends, they were asking me a bunch of questions like, how did you know? Like, when
Right.
did you find out
Yeah.
that you were trans, or discovering yourself sort of questions. And I was totally okay with answering those questions. And I've mentioned this many times, I'll have a conversation with people about my transgender lifestyle as long as they're going to
Right.
be respectful about it.
Yeah.
If they're not going to be respectful, I ain't going to have a conversation.
Yeah. Yeah, me too. I just tell people, I'm an open book. You got to be respectful. My only thing is I won't talk about it at work.
Right. And, my grandma's one of those people that I just will not have a conversation with her about it because she's just, not respectful about it. I'm like, no, I'm not going to talk to you about this, especially if the way you keep phrasing it.
Right.
It doesn't sound like it's coming from a
place of love.
Yeah.
It's like a place of resentment.
Right. It's
Yeah.
like, why are you asking these questions so harshly? And I get she was raised in a different generation, but times are changing.
Well, and there are people who are raised in her generation that are so supportive.
Oh, I know. Yeah, exactly.
Right.
It's weird.
Crazy supportive.
Yeah, and it's strange.
Yeah.
And they always have that term oh, you can't teach an old dog new tricks.
It depends on the old dog.
Right.
Whether
Yeah.
they want to learn or not.
Right. Too difficult to try to learn about it. So it's nope, we're just not going to
Yeah.
even try.
Yeah.
I feel like if she tried a little bit more, she could be a bit more accepting, but
It's her life, and she's
Right.
close to the end of it, and
Oh,
doesn't
yeah.
want to do much.
Some kind of thing. God loves us all, and He died for us all. I work for the federal government. Many of you know I work for the Forest Service, and this trans issue has become a big thing. But about 7 years ago, I was in a meeting with a leadership team, and I was helping to facilitate, and the question was asked, how do you identify yourself? that's a different question than saying, introduce yourself. And I was caught off guard. What the heck is this? I don't know. I'm like, well, I'm a country Christian girl. Some of you know my testimony. And when I was younger, I struggled with gender dysphoria and same-sex attraction. But in that day and age, when I was...
How do we know that that's something that person actually went through?
Right. Unless, and they're not just trying to level with you.
Right,
and try to, bring out your humility in their story. Well, I mean, maybe you did, and it wasn't for you. It doesn't mean you have to broadcast that it's not for everyone.
Right, there's people I've been talking to recently that said they used to be trans, and they discovered that, hey, that's not for me.
There's a lot of people who end up just detransitioning, whether they aren't transgender, or if they're, gender fluid, or non-binary, or whatever.
Yeah, that it just depends, because I know there for a while I was saying I was gender fluid because that's how I felt. And
I feel like people were pushing that on you as
well. Yeah, people wanted me to be gender fluid. They would rather me be gender fluid
than
because
transgender,
because it means I can wear both clothing and switch back and forth, and it's no, I don't want to do this, keep switching back and forth. I want to be actually who I am 100% of the time.
Right.
And a lot of people don't like that. My grandma, for instance, told me once that she would rather me be a cross-dresser than transgender.
Thanks, Grandma.
It's pretty much the same thing, except only that would mean I wouldn't want to go through any of the surgeries and stuff, but I do.
Yeah.
And so...
Well, if you're okay with wrapping your head around, cross-dressing,
Right.
Take it a step further. You can't wrap your head around just transgender.
Right. And I used to have this belief that back in the day that, I did not want to get any kind of surgeries whatsoever on my body when I was younger, because I thought, if I get those surgeries, that's what's going to keep me from heaven, and I was under this lie and impression that, if I do anything to my body, I'm not going to heaven. And it's
get your wisdom teeth removed, you're not going to heaven.
And then I started thinking, well, you know what the hell? I see so many, youth pastors nowadays that have, tattoos and stuff, and it clearly says, you cannot have tattoos, and it's what about these people? Yeah. It's so there's got to be some room, some wiggle room.
Right.
It's not like I'm leaving the Christianity lifestyle. Right. Once I transition, I'm still going to be a Christian.
Well, what I've noticed is Christians they have the biggest, they gatekeep.
Oh, yeah.
You can't get into heaven unless you do this, that, and the other.
Right.
But it's who are you to tell me how to get into heaven?
Right.
When you're also human who sin. You're a human that sins.
Right. Everybody sins. There's, people may not even know it, but there's stuff in the Bible that, the everyday person is sinning about. Yeah. It could be the smallest thing, but it's you're still sinning.
Well, and the Bible says, he who is without sin may cast the first stone. But it's not talking about your preachers and whatever you have it. They have sin as well. They're talking about Jesus.
Right.
Jesus is the only person without sin. So he is the only person who can judge you.
Right. Mm-hmm. And I think what falls in line with this, which is completely ridiculous, I'm not going to say any names just to keep it private, but I recently just got told that I am not allowed to serve in my church because I am living in sin. And it's I bet you I could pick any person out of the church right now that is
living some sort of sin.
Yeah, that is serving in the church currently. And it's
and I mean, even something as small as, gluttony.
Or having a drinking problem.
Yeah.
And
or,
it's
just eating too much.
Yeah.
That's a sin.
And it's to me, it seems more of an issue that I'm trans than anything.
Right.
And it's I know you're trying to beat around the bush and use kind words so it doesn't come back on you. But in reality, I see it as it's because I'm trans. Mm-hmm. If I wasn't trans, you'd be all good for it.
Yeah.
I could be living any other sin and you'd probably be okay, yeah, that's fine.
Yeah. You could be married and be cheating on your significant other.
Right.
Great.
Yeah,
perfect.
Great.
You could be divorced.
Yeah.
Keep coming back.
But you show up in a dress, that's it, we're done.
Yeah.
And it's really, it's I just want to serve and get further in my faith journey.
Right.
And this has actually set me back in my faith journey because it's pushed me away from church, and I haven't been going to church as much as I was because I'm just like, why am I going if I'm not going to move any further than I want to?
Well, you can try to find a more friendly church in town, or even, you can do online churches.
Right.
As
well, there is a friendly church in town that's LGBTQ accepting that I've been wanting to try, but since I'm moving to Portland, I'm definitely going to find one over there.
Oh yeah, you'll definitely find something over there.
I'm going to find something that's good and healthy for me.
Yeah.
I might even try something with a woman pastor too.
Oh yeah.
Because a lot of, I don't know why, but some Christians have problem with women preachers.
Yeah, they have issues with women being in any kind of like authority role with the church. Mm-hmm. They're like, oh hell no.
Like, women can't tell me what to do.
Right.
And it's like, no, it's like women have every right to do what they want to do.
Yeah.
And it's just wild that there's still
crazy. It's
people
backwards
out there like that are like, oh, women don't deserve power.
Right.
Much younger, society was not hell-bent on convincing people that if you had those issues that you were in the wrong body. And the church was still denouncing homosexuality consistently, thankfully. But today, as
thankfully,
many of you may have felt already, that it's kind of in your face, this transgender thing. And as a federal government employee, it is 3 times that. And I find myself preparing.
So I don't really think that society is really forcing people to transition.
Yeah, I don't either, and I think as like a federal government employee, you have to be careful broadcasting that you're transphobic, homophobic, Christian, and a federal employee,
right?
Because
the federal,
that's pretty serious,
right? And the federal employees, wherever they may work, like for like the government or for the post office or those kinds of places aren't like shoving it on you either.
Right.
They're not being
They have rules, like you can't be homophobic, transphobic, you can't be racist.
Yeah, you can't be discriminatory towards race or somebody's identification.
But it's not just like, oh, you you have to go to this pride event.
Yeah, like
to keep your job.
Like you have to attend this meeting to keep your job about transgenderism, and it's like,
and we're gonna bring in all these trans people and drag queens, and they're gonna dance on the tables.
Yeah, like it doesn't happen that way, and like people aren't out on the streets either, like telling your kids and stuff like, hey, you have to attend this meeting.
You have to be gay.
Yeah, like you have to be gay, like you.
And also, what I kind of got from this video is like they're trying to say gay people are being pushed into being transgender. Mm-hmm. They were basically like, if you like a different sex, they're pushing you to change your sex.
Right. And it's almost like they're okaying being gay. Like, you're fine to be gay, but if they start pushing you to change your gender, then that's when it's a problem.
Except for the part where they're like, thankfully the churches still do.
Right.
Yeah.
The churches...
Thankfully.
Yeah, they're like, thankfully the churches still do. And they said more consistently back then, they said the churches did it. And it's like, what do you mean back then? They're still doing it consistently.
Exactly.
They're still denouncing it.
Yeah.
I mean, there's a few accepting churches out there, but it's like that's a good thing.
I mean, I think didn't the Pope recently just accept gay people?
I think so.
I think so. They were like, well, everybody can live the way they want to
live.
Right,
yeah.
Which you would think that would be everybody else's cue to be like, oh, let's get more people in here and we're, start accepting gay people so our church doesn't end up empty.
Right.
In like 10, 20 years.
Yeah, and then there's a lot of people that just disagree with it. They're like, what the hell is our leader saying to us?
Yeah.
And they're like, no, we're not going to do that.
Right.
And it's wild. It's crazy that people aren't more accepting in this day and age, and society is not telling you to become trans.
Right.
Society's just becoming more aware and more accepting of it. So society is helping us put it out there more.
Yeah. Well, and like if you look at these churches, there are less and less people our age attending church altogether. Mm-hmm. So who do they expect to run those churches, step up and run those churches and bring their families to church? Your church is going to be dead in like a matter of years.
Yeah, and it's like, it's a lot of the older generations that are going to church, and the younger generation that is going to church are taking on these beliefs from the older generation. So it's like it's just passing it down.
And it's gonna end up being a smaller and smaller church. It's gonna be like 3 families that go to this church.
Right.
That used to be like booming,
Right. And I don't agree with like rewriting the Bible, but I think that it's great that we have these accepting churches, and I've heard some things about LGBTQ making their own Bible, and I think it's not really rewriting it. I think it's just they're trying to make more terms that are less.
The thing about the Bible is it has been rewritten.
Well, yes.
Multiple times.
Oh, yeah.
And they say it's to dumb it down, but every time it is significantly different.
Right.
Every time they write it.
Because they're
like the Old Testament, the New Testament, the King James Version.
Right.
They're all rewrites. There is no actual translation to the original Bible. They're guessing about what it says.
It's like there's videos out there where people go through the different translations of the Bible and what some of the ones actually mean compared to newer stuff. And they're complaining about, like, say, men wearing dresses and stuff.
Which is funny to me because historically dresses were, like, for men.
Yeah.
Because, like, you look back at, like, men that wear kilts and all sorts of shit.
You were seen as, like, brave warrior type.
Well, and the long hair, that's a new age thing, is like cutting your hair short to be masculine. The biggest masculine thing you could do way back in history was grow your hair out.
Yeah. Even like braids and stuff.
Yeah, you were honored if you had like your thick hair.
Like Samson.
Yeah.
He was big and strong with his hair.
Yep.
And it's like, and it's just like it was like a sign of respect almost.
Yeah.
Like people saw you differently as a huge, strong person.
Right. Yeah. Well, and in some cultures there was even like dishonor in cutting your hair super short. Like,
yeah.
If you did something wrong, cut your hair.
Yeah.
In arguments and trying to figure out how I say something that will be of some benefit. It feels like you have to be on one side or the other. You have, and being on one side is not acceptable. So I will talk to you today about transgenderism, but really is at the core of the issue is identity. Even though transgenderism has become the thing, it's like growing exponentially right now in the last few years. When we seem to think that it's a kind of a sudden thing, it's been coming along for a long time because we have been, as a society, trying to find other ways to self-identify ourselves.
So in the beginning they say it's a new thing, but then after that comment right there, they say it's been coming for a while.
Right. Yeah.
So which is it?
People are always trying to, like, they've always been searching for their identity.
Right.
Yeah.
So it's like they said this is a new thing, this is happening now, like it's very new. But then they also say, but it's been coming up for a long time. Like, well, which is it?
Right.
Like, make up your mind. Which one do you believe? But we have to self-identify on certain things. Like, that would be like me saying, I'm depressed. Like, no, you can't do that. Mm-hmm. You're not allowed to say you're depressed because you can't self-identify yourself.
You can't say you're a Christian.
Right? Yeah. You're self-identifying.
That's how you identify.
Yeah. Like, you're a Christian. I'm a Christian. No, you're not. You can't do that.
Yeah.
Or
you gotta hide that.
Right. Or in the other sermon, they compared being transgender to saying if a car wanted to be a boat, is what their example was.
Well, a car doesn't have an actual brain.
That's just a weird example to use.
That would be a transformer.
Right. Yeah. Transformer. That's a good one. A transformer. As humans, we can make that decision.
Well, and they're just trying to debate free will as a human race,
right?
Like in control. Like if you just wake up one day and you're like, I'm transgender, that's frowned upon. But if you're an atheist and you wake up one day and you go, I think I'm Christian, they would fucking love that.
Oh yeah,
They'd be like, yeah, come on in.
come on in, we love you.
Yeah.
Or vice versa, like decide to detransition and become a Christian, then perfect.
Yeah, they're like, you're even more welcome than before.
But if you want to stay a Christian like me and transition, then oh man, that's the even bigger no-no.
Yeah.
Than just being trans by itself.
Which, besides like just having closed minds, I don't understand why they're closing that off, because that brings in a whole new like diverse crowd for you to bring into your church to keep your church running, because you gotta pay bills somehow. Like, you gotta keep your electric
right.
You guys already don't pay taxes. I don't know. Yeah, and part of it is like, if they would just let new minds in the church, they could really diversify. Diversifying the church would bring in like more people, and it'd be more fun.
Now, I'm not saying that people in the church have to accept us or have to live this lifestyle, but I feel like if there's more information out there, it would cause less fear mongering.
Right.
And we would have less people being afraid of us.
Yeah.
Because I feel like people act out of hate, not because they're truly hateful towards us. They're just afraid.
Yeah.
They're afraid of learning about us or wanting to know anything.
Right. Yeah. And the churches don't help because they think their job is to, create that fear.
The Bible says nothing about going out and hating thy neighbor.
Mm-hmm.
It says love thy neighbor.
Specifically does not say that.
Right, yeah. It's like, so I don't know where you're getting this from.
Right. Taking a page out of your own book.
Yeah. And I hate to say it, as a Christian myself, I believe Christians take things out of context all the time and use it to fit whatever they want it to fit.
Yeah.
And it's like, oh, this works for this, so this is how I feel.
Right. Yeah.
And
I don't disagree.
Growing exponentially right now in the last few years.
Growing exponentially.
And we seem to think that it's a kind of a sudden thing. It's been coming along for a long time. Because we have been, as a society, trying to find other ways to self-identify ourselves. To get to where we're at now, we had to believe a series of lies before we can, come to the place where we can say, gender and sex are a separate thing, and you can be a man in a woman's body. So I'm sure there are more.
I don't even understand what they're talking about now.
Like, is it just confusing, or?
Yeah, it's just confusing. Like,
so yeah, like
I'm so confused.
Like
gender and your sexual orientation are different things.
Right.
It's definitely interesting.
It's like it's never been your sex and gender, never been one thing.
Mm-hmm.
Or sexual orientation, I should say,
right.
And gender. Like, if you're saying sex and gender, then yeah, that's pretty much the same thing. But like, sexual orientation and gender are two different things.
Sexual orientation is who you are attracted to.
Right.
And then your gender identity is how you identify. Like, those are completely different things.
So you can be a biological female and be into women.
Right.
And those are two different things.
Yeah.
They're not the same thing.
Yeah.
So.
Well, and the only sexual orientation that they're saying is wrong is if you're like gay or bisexual. Not if you're straight. Not if your sexual orientation is straight.
Right.
Because that is an umbrella term for all these other things.
Yeah. Whatever point they're trying to get across now is just confusing.
Yeah. But I'm going to talk about 4 of them. First of all, the idea that there is no God. We were created by this random chance of evolution to become who we are, to be a species. To say that there is no God opens everything up to all kinds of misinformation.
So Christians don't believe in evolution.
Right.
But he's bringing that up.
Yeah, bringing evolution up because supposedly that's one of the lies that we've believed, is that there's no God, and that's why we're able to be trans, is because there is no God and we were just created by some chance.
What if we believe in multiple gods?
Right. I
mean, it's still wrong in their book, but it's not believing in no God.
Right. And like there are LGBTQ people that don't believe in God, but we're not like outright just saying that we don't believe in God.
Like, God doesn't exist, but trans exists.
Right.
Like, no, we're not saying that.
Like, we're not putting that out on posters and stuff and plastering it everywhere.
Well, and there are, like you, there are, Christian transgender people.
Yeah.
And then there are, it's diverse. It's like everybody who's so different because they're all unique people and they're all fucking different.
Yeah, well, like that podcast who went on to, that guy said he doesn't really attend church anymore, but he does believe there is a God.
Yeah.
And I was like, well, see, that's like the fact that you can do something like that is amazing to me.
Right.
Like, because most people, like, and I don't judge them, but most people are just like, nope, there's nothing, like, who cares? Like, I don't really give a shit where I go when I die, sort of mentality. And it's like, we're not going around saying there isn't a God.
Right.
So I don't know where they're getting this.
Yeah. I mean, unless that's your personal preference, which, is just like a percentage of people.
Yeah, definitely.
And lies and deception. Number two, we are believing this lie that says there is no objective truth. The last two are, in a sense, valuable virtues in our country. We celebrate independence and individuality, right? It's important, and we believe that each individual has a right to pursue happiness. But at the same time, that independence can be twisted, and it can separate us from community, from family, and we are left all on our own to determine who we are, what we're going to do, what our purpose and plan is, and to a point where we have very few guidelines even.
One thing they said was that you lose community, you lose family, and it's like, well, sometimes that's necessary.
Right.
Because you realize how toxic and hateful your family is towards your transition.
Well, and you lose them because they choose not to be there for you.
Right.
They're making the choice, usually.
Yeah, and it's like, it's not your decision a lot of the times. A lot of times you're forced to make that decision once it happens, but it's a lot of times them leaving you behind, not you leaving them.
Yeah, because they're like, either you can be a part of this or you can go transition and you can forget about us.
Right.
Yeah.
And it's like, it's not a fact of us leaving our family or a community of friends.
Right.
It's like, usually it's because they're hateful.
Yeah.
And we feel like we have no choice.
When they ostracize you.
Yeah. And it's like, there is separation and stuff of family, but it's not like to the extent up and separating ourselves from people, because that's that's a lot of our big thing of the LGBTQ is having such a huge community,
right,
and having a huge group that
you have to have that support, otherwise it's really hard. It doesn't help when people are like, okay, well, bye.
Yeah, it's really hard to be alone during this process, and it's even difficult for you down the road when you try to get on medications and stuff because they require such a huge support system.
Yeah, some doctors won't even provide you with hormones if your family just up and decides, you're not a part of their life anymore, and if you don't have any support, they won't.
Mm-hmm. So here's something I wrote down is, so far we've gone from identity transgenderism to identity crisis to now evolution.
Right.
Like, why is it jumping around?
Right. Yeah.
And it's just weird to me, like, there were certain things that were said in this video that it's just like, what are you trying to get across?
Well, and they're saying things like, they're umbrellaing a lot of things. They don't want to get into details about it.
They're like trimming around the bush.
Right, yeah.
And it's like, either dive in or don't dive in.
Right.
It's like, either go to the deep end or stay in the shallow end and don't talk about it at all.
Yeah.
Like, I feel like if they would get more into it and do more research, I wouldn't even be making this video. Like, they would have had well thought out research and done their research, because once we'll find out when we get more towards the end of this video, there's not much research done at all.
Oh, yeah.
Like, it's just because I was able to do the research and disprove a lot of what was being said.
Well, yeah. And that's a part of fear-mongering, though.
Boundaries that kind of point us in the right direction even. Because it's all about the self, the individual. and you get to choose what you want to do. The last one is authenticity. Now that's a good thing, right? Being honest and transparent and not having that secret shadow self that Mitch talked about last week. But what's happened with that, and the enemy has twisted that as well, as to say that, you know, you need to embrace whatever makes you feel good, because that's your authentic self, regardless of what it is.
So out of that whole thing, what scares me the most is now we're the enemy.
Yeah, now we're considered the enemy.
Yeah, the enemy wants you to embrace your true self. You're not talking about the devil. You're not talking about anything else. You're talking about transgender people. They are your enemy.
Right, and the fact that they just said it's a good thing to embrace who you are.
And your authenticity.
Yeah, and your authenticity, but then it's like, no, it's actually a bad thing.
Well, and they, I'm assuming their last sermon was like, you can't carry around this shadow self or whatever,
right,
I don't know.
And hide who
but,
you are.
It's like you're forcing people to hide who they are.
Right, yeah. And it's like, because I will say this from personal experience, I never came out to my family till I was in high school, because growing up, we were a, conservative Christian family,
right.
And we always went to church, and I was terrified
to
tell my family. And as we got older, my family started separating from the church and becoming more open to things, so I felt more comfortable with telling them.
Right.
And, it's like, my mom always said, oh, you never showed any true signs of actually being transgender. And it's like, well, because I felt afraid.
When you hide it, my mom said the same thing. But
right.
It's also like, if you don't know what to look for, you're not going to see any signs.
Right. And it's like, I love my mom, and she just didn't see any of the signs.
Right.
It wasn't like you never showed any of the signs. It's like, no, I was just doing it in secret.
Right. Or I showed these these small things,
oh, yeah.
But they were overlooked, and you just thought I was weird or
right.
different.
Yeah, because there were times I tried to do that.
There are times when my family will be like, well, you didn't show any signs, but it's like, but you knew I was different is the point.
Mm-hmm.
You didn't care what type of different I was.
Right, yeah. It was it was interesting. Because I had a lot of that where I was like, I would try to show them things like, I want to do this, and they would just blow past it, not even see it. And there was times when I was in high school, home alone with my mom. It would just be me and her, and she would try to get me to she'd want to try to teach me how to sew and stuff, and I would be like, no, I don't want to do that. I just really don't feel comfortable with that.
Yeah.
And because I still wanted to hide it. I didn't
right.
want to.
Yeah.
I mean, I know guys can sew too, but it's that's a feminine thing that I didn't want my mom to know, yeah, I would actually love to learn this, but I don't want you to know that this is who I am
right.
quite yet.
Yeah. You don't want them to be like, oh, you like a lot of the female roles.
Right.
Yeah.
And are you enjoying the podcast? Because I know I am. I'm actually making some popcorn right now as we speak. Well, hey, since you're enjoying the podcast, why don't you head over to CBV Squad merch and get yourself some of my quality merch. We have the Chadwick Bomb podcast, we have the Chadwick Bomb vlogs, and we have lots of more merch on the CBV Squad merch page. Oh, my popcorn's done. Head on over to CBV Squad merch today. There are times when I I do all this woodworking and stuff where I like to go do manly things like woodworking and go outdoors and do shit, but it's that doesn't define me as a man.
Right.
I could still be a woman and do those things. There shouldn't be this boundary this is for girls, this
right.
is for boys.
They're just hobbies.
Yeah, the whole argument with Barbies and G.I. Joes.
Yeah.
It's just a fucking toy.
It's a fucking doll. And
right.
Why do you want your kid to only play with one gender doll?
Right.
Because
Right. You know how many girls I've seen play with Barbies?
Yeah.
And it's they play with Barbies and they play with G.I. Joes because they need a man there too.
Yeah, they're interacting.
A toy doesn't define who someone is. I mean, they make an argument in here that talks about kids being transgender and whatnot. I don't think there's a problem with kids being transgender. I feel to see your kid in a dress one day and then the next day decide that that's their new pronouns and stuff is a bit much. I mean, I think you have to wait it out and really see how your kid expresses themselves, and like ask your kid, like, do you want more of this stuff? Because if you do, I will get it for you. But if this is just something you're doing today, that's fine.
Yeah.
And I want to be that person for my future kids. So I'm like, hey, if you like to wear dresses, I love you and support you.
Right.
And
whatever you feel comfortable in.
Yeah, whatever you feel comfortable in. And if it's not something you like and
you can just
playing
drop
around,
it. Yeah.
we don't have to do this ever again.
Right.
I don't ever want my future kids to feel like I forced them to be something they didn't want to do. You know, I want it to come from a place of love, not a place of like, oh, I want to push all my shit onto you.
Well, and home is your safe place for everybody. Yeah. So, yeah.
And I don't like that certain places that are prominently red states are taking children from their parents that are allowing them to express who they want to be.
Yeah.
It's like, that's fucked up. You're taking kids from their homes.
Right.
Just because they want to be trans or, it's like, what the fuck?
Yeah.
It's like ridiculous.
Well, you're taking them from their homes and you're putting them where? In foster care, which is potentially more,
more dangerous.
Dangerous.
Yeah. And it's just wild.
Makes you feel good, you need to embrace it. If it makes you feel repressed or makes you feel uncomfortable, then you need to reject that. So that makes you become so self-reflective and so sensitive to every little microaggression or every little thing that may seem counter to what makes you feel good, that you've twisted yourself to a point where you're looking for something that is not really even findable. And that's what's happening to people today. All of these lies have led us to believe that we can self-identify. We as created beings can determine who and what we are. We've been doing this for a long time. It's not like, yes, transgenderism is the thing that has happened to us right now. It's the seems like suddenly. It's like a marriage where you feel like, it fell apart suddenly. But in actuality, there's little steps along the way that you take that have made that couple grow further and further apart. It's what we've done as a society with accepting these lies. We're now at a place where transgenderism can expand. More so,
they just shove so much in like such little time.
And
so many different things that I want to just be like, bullshit.
And they compared it to a marriage.
Right.
Like, oh, it just happened suddenly.
Right.
Like, it happened overnight. And it's like,
Well, what they're saying is, compared to the relationship, is like, you think it happens overnight, but it collectively builds up and you make all these different choices. Mm-hmm. So they're trying to compare that to society letting like being transgender fly until we're at this point now where people are openly,
and this brings me back
themselves.
This brings me back to a conversation my mom said where she feels like the internet influenced me and certain TV shows like Degrassi influenced me, and it's like, well, it's like those shows, yes, may have influenced my decisions in helping me figure out who I am in that aspect. But
they showed you a different side than what you were already being shown.
Right, but they didn't influence me in a way where it's like, oh, I have to change my gender now.
Right. Well, like, you didn't just watch Degrassi and then wake up the next day and be like, I'm trans.
Yep.
It's been like a lifelong struggle that you have been going through.
Yeah, and I feel like the way they're saying is there was different influences in her life that made this happen, and it's like, well, I think it's something that you are born with, and there are certain instances that awaken certain parts of your journey that are like, oh wait, I like this, this feels good, and it's like
But that's just learning about yourself, which you do whether you like it or not. You learn about yourself every day until your life ends.
Right. That's like eating a can of baked beans and then waking up the next morning and making your whole life about baked beans.
Right.
Like, oh, I have to buy baked bean t-shirts, baked bean hat, put baked bean stickers all over my car. It's like, that'd be the same thing almost. It's like making your life, it doesn't work that way.
Yeah.
It's like I've never met someone that eats a food and then makes it their whole life. I mean, I've met people that will drink like ciders and stuff and make it their whole life. I'm just kidding.
I don't have cider stickers all over my car.
No, but in reality, yeah, like I don't see people that make something their whole life.
Right.
It's just, I mean, yeah, there are people that are heavily invested in the LGBTQ and supporting it 24/7, but it's not because...
Which, I mean, it's needed, though, because
Right.
people are dying.
Yeah.
And people need to see that you're supported, you have allies.
Yeah.
And, you know...
And the whole people killing themselves thing is not because they transitioned. It's because they don't have good support systems and they don't feel loved.
Well, and the hate that just comes from places like this,
Yeah.
it's not helpful.
No.
Yeah.
No, because, see, like, I was completely taken off guard by it because...
And I'm sure that it made you feel dysphoric and scared, you know.
Right. I was like, how am I supposed to react to this? Like it got to a point where I got up and left during it because I was like, I can't...
Well, and I'm sure it felt like they were preaching specifically at you.
Right, almost, yeah. And I was like, I can't be in this. Like, I don't know how to deal with this right now. I need to take some time, step away from it, rewatch it, and really process it when I have a clear mind so I can come back to it with proper answers and whatnot to really know what's going on.
Right.
So, yeah, it just seems like they're throwing a lot of information at once to really...
Yeah, they do. Like, it's like subject, like they just bring up a subject and they don't even dive into it and explain what they're talking about. They're just like, here's this is here, it's wrong. Yeah, this is wrong too.
And I think they're trying to just like quickly glaze over it so they don't have to dive into it. So it's like, oh, here's this, blah, 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 moving on.
Right.
They're trying to get them to understand the negative aspects of it.
They're just trying to briefly say how wrong it is.
Right.
You know.
And I notice in a lot in this video, they say pretty much the same thing, but in different words.
Yeah. Well, they're on a soapbox right now.
Right.
That's what they're doing.
Yeah.
You are expected, our youth especially, are expected to find that passion to pursue that will help them express their authentic self. And so many of them are struggling with determining what that passion is. And they're paralyzed to some degree. And we as a society are wrestling with who we are. But we only see this from one vantage point. Where I go and what I see and how I was growing up and what happened to me in school, all of that influences me. And now everything on the internet influences me. So to say that I'm self-identifying who I am, you're not recognizing how many different influences are affecting that decision that you make. Not to mention the spiritual entities that are taking advantage of every time you feel angst or depression. Or you...
There's just a lot in that. Like...
So
you gotta pick and choose what you want to like talk about with
so
these
like
little segments.
Like the internet thing is wild to me because that's what we just talked about.
Right.
The internet influencing. I don't think it influences rather than shows us who we are.
Like I think there's like the small percentage of people who may or may not be influenced by it because I have heard of this, but it's not the majority.
Right.
You know? And it's spreading information and it's opening people's eyes to like how good their life can be.
And I don't know the proper term for it, but I know there are people out there that are like the chasers, like following the wave and saying they are trans when in reality, you know, they're not. It's just like a way for them to feel like
they've got a community.
Yeah, like they got a community and they're welcome somewhere.
Well, and I think there's an underlying problem where they don't feel a sense of community anywhere else.
Right, and I think the one that really drives me nuts, and anybody that supports this, like, can f*** off in my opinion, and I just hate it to all degree, is the so-called trans people that are actually pedophiles that take advantage of the whole bathroom thing. That just pisses me off right there because that too causes a bad name on us.
Right.
it adds it to our plate when in reality we're not even the ones doing it.
Right.
Like, we're just trying to do like everybody else, go to the bathroom, get the fuck out of there, and go back to our shopping or our meal. We're not trying to fucking...
Right.
Like,
well, and I mean, like, I've rarely seen, like, that instance where there's been, like, a few actual trans people that were taking advantage of, like, using the women's restroom. Mm-hmm. But it's not as many as just, like, men sneaking into the women's restroom. Oh, yeah.
Like, I can't tell you how many TikToks I've seen in the past few years of like douchebag men just walking into women's restrooms and be like, this is how I identify.
And not just that, but actual perverts, like perverted men. There was, I don't know if you heard about it, but a couple of years ago, someone that worked at Safeway here got arrested for that, and they took their phone, and they actually had been taking pictures in the women's restroom and just like hanging out in the women's restroom, taking pictures under the stall and shit.
Oh shit.
Yeah.
Yeah, see that I didn't hear, but that's wild.
So you hear more about those instances happening rather than, people who are, transgender that are doing that. And
no offense, but you will see actual effort and work put in from an actual transgender woman. I mean, you can obviously tell if it's like a pedophile just pretending because you'll see less work.
Right. Well, and that's why, like, it comes into play if you see something, say something.
Right.
Because not everybody can be trusted. But most people are in the bathroom to use the bathroom.
Right. It's like, what the fuck? I used to get weird looks all the time. And it's like, I'm just trying to go to the bathroom.
Well, I used to get, before I just switched over, before I even started hormones, I got weird looks in the women's bathroom.
Oh, I bet.
And, like, I even had, like, this little lady come up to me, it was nice, but it was also kind of freaked me out. But she was like, oh, are you affected by the new law where you can't use the bathroom of your choosing? And, like, she was trying to be supportive.
Right.
Like a really supportive old grandma. Yeah. But I was so caught off guard by her age and her openness and her question. Mm-hmm. And I was, like, just in the bathroom.
Yeah.
I was just like, and, she saw how shocked I was.
Right.
And she was like, oh, we don't have to talk about that. And just kind of left.
Yeah, right. I see that. Yeah, it definitely catches you off guard. The most I've ever dealt with is a woman, like, spotted I was wearing a wig, and she just complimented me on it. Didn't even, like...
Like, before I even started hormones, sometimes I'd go in the women's bathroom, and you can hear people, they're like, oh, there's a boy in here. And, like, even though it's kind of confirming to me, it's also scary. Yeah. Because it's like, well, I haven't even started hormones
It's like
yet.
At the same time, you're worried that it could also get you in an unsafe place as well.
And I've had people walk up to me and go, you're in the wrong place.
Right.
Before I even started transitioning.
Right. And it's just that point of where I think it has to be within ourselves to where we feel comfortable going in the appropriate restroom, because I'll tell you, like, right now, I wouldn't go into a women's restroom.
And I don't blame you.
Because I don't look or feel the way I want to.
Well, and you're liable to get the shit kicked out of you.
Yeah, and if now, say, down the road after like several treatments, laser hair removal, and being on hormones for a while, then maybe I'll start using the appropriate restroom. But it's like,
which makes me feel extremely bad for any woman that has PCOS.
Oh yeah,
or anything.
Yeah,
because I'm sure they get misgendered too, and they get threatened as well.
Yeah, I'm sure. I want to know how many of those people are getting called out for being trans, and
or even just being like, "Oh, you're a dude," and it's like, "No, I'm not." But thank you for pointing out the one thing wrong with me.
Yeah,
or not wrong with me, but the one thing that
Right, and then
it doesn't make them feel good.
Yeah, and then there's some women out there that just own it, and they're just like, "Oh yeah, this is me." Like, fuck you. Yeah. Like, I don't care what you say to me. Like, this is me.
Yeah.
Like, several people tried to get me to be confident like that, and like, "Oh, just embrace your beard and be a woman." I'm like, well, there's this thing called dysphoria, and it doesn't allow me to be comfortable with it.
Yeah, well, and you also, in this town, it's so conservative, it's hard because, like,
right,
if someone runs out and they're like, oh, there's a man in this bathroom, there's going to be dudes coming in the bathroom to kick your ass.
Oh yeah, like,
whether
at that point they're not going to care. Like, dudes are just going to pile in that bathroom and kick the shit out of me.
Yeah.
Like, and that's that's one of the reasons, like, in my recent boundaries that I wrote, like, I list specifically in there that I am trans because I don't know what I'm going to look like down the line. I may be super passable to the point where, some guy wants to take me home.
Right.
I need them to know that I'm trans.
Right.
so I don't end up in a worse situation of a guy like trying to kill me or
Right.
beat the shit out of me because he found a mysterious prize
Right.
that he wasn't happy with.
Exactly, yeah.
And it's like, I need to be open about that, like first date or whatever.
Right. Oh, I don't understand why when people are trying to, like, I understand if you're just messing around with someone and you just don't want them to know because it's not their business. But if you're trying to find a life partner and you hide that until
Right.
like 6 months, a
Oh,
year
yeah.
down the road, and then you're like, here's this other part of me you didn't know about, and you have to accept it.
Right. Yeah.
I don't understand, like...
Yeah, like why people try to do that is crazy, and I think in someone like in my situation, that would be very difficult to do, especially
Right.
if somebody wanted to be intimate.
Right.
It'd be like, I just can't figure out why they never want to be intimate. Like
Right.
they would have to start raising suspicions.
Yeah.
Now I could pull the card and say like, oh, I'm waiting till marriage because
Right.
that's what I believe, and I wouldn't want to be that person that hides it
Right.
from them. I want them to know right out the gate.
Well, because then they just feel like you've lied to them,
Yeah.
and like they're betrayed and shit.
And there was one time that happened to me where I was talking to a girl, and it was only for it had only been for 3 days so far. She ended up finding out, and she confronted me about it, and I
Yeah.
told her I needed to make sure you were a safe person to tell
Right,
before
exactly.
I did. I don't think you should hide it from a potential partner or someone you're trying to have romantic relationship with.
Right, yeah, especially if you're looking for long term.
Or even if you're making new friends, because I've made new friends before, especially through my church, I've made new friends, and it's like, oh, well, here, this is how I believe, and then it's like, oh, well, shit, I should probably be the appropriate time to be like, well, this is actually how I believe.
Right.
Like,
And if that's not okay, maybe we can't be friends.
right, and it's like, sometimes I just feel awkward, so I'm like, how am I going to tell them that, this is how I actually feel about this situation? And sometimes I've just been one of those crowd followers where I'll be like, yeah, you know what? Fuck those people,
Right.
because I don't want them to know. So it's like I might as well just play the part.
You don't want to put yourself in a dangerous situation because it can become a dangerous situation.
Yeah, it's like I don't want these people to know, so I'm just going to. How I handle it is I kind of feel out the situation. It's not that I'm hiding from somebody, just I feel out the situation until I'm ready to really tell somebody how I feel.
Yeah, or not, depending on how they are.
Yeah.
You might just be like, I'm never coming here again after
Right.
this.
And if I feel it out enough and I'm just like, oh, well, I really don't trust telling this person this information, so I just don't.
And all the divisiveness and the pressure and the, biological men claiming to be trans women in sports, in the locker room, in the bathroom, in the prisons, and in the beauty pageants where they win. It seems insanely crazy putting children on puberty blockers.
I just think it's funny that he's in the prisons because it's you're watching Orange is the New Black because
Right.
they deny you that
And-
right in prison.
And there's even an episode of Law and Order where that happens, where a transgender female gets sent to a male prison because they're like, you are biologically
You're
male.
detransitioning now. Yeah.
It's like, here you go. And
Yeah.
it's like, they ended up getting jumped in the episode, but that's not the point I'm trying to make. But it's like, I think, yeah, you're right. Where are they pulling that from? Because it's like, you hardly ever see that. Because usually, if you've committed a crime,
Yeah.
they're not going to give a fuck where they send you.
Trans people specifically try not to commit crimes
Yeah.
because, especially if they're on hormones, because they don't want to stop taking their hormones.
Yeah. And it's like they don't give a shit if they what they identify as if a trans person has committed a crime, because they're going to send them wherever they're
Because
biological.
you have to be medically fully transitioned
Right.
in order to be put. If you're male to female, you have to be completely medically transitioned to be put in a female prison, and vice versa.
Yep. The one thing I do want to talk about is the huge debate that goes on for years and years on end, is the whole transgenders in sports dominating
Right.
women's teams, and it's not really you have to be on
Yeah.
hormones for a certain amount of time.
And your people are like, oh, well, just because you're on hormones doesn't mean you're not gonna be a man. No, it definitely fucking means that because
Yeah.
it changes your whole makeup of your body.
yeah.
You know, like your muscles are different, your fat redistribution's different,
Yeah.
everything's different, so you're not still at that level that like a man would perform.
Tell me when having testosterone has really made a man any better than a woman anyway, because I've seen instances, especially
Right.
with me, myself, where women have kicked my ass in sports.
Yeah.
And it's like,
Yeah.
you're going to tell me I'm going to be able to outperform a woman? No,
Right.
thank you.
Yeah.
It's like, I can't even do that
Yeah.
as a man currently. So me transitioning
yeah.
to a woman's not going to affect any of that.
Yeah. Well, and like we stopped it on something that's really big right now is putting kids on hormone blockers.
Oh, yes.
Which, like, it's debatable whether, you know, you can or not, because I do agree with, like, I think it's can be harmful to your bones.
Right.
Like, from, like, a medical perspective, it can harm the density of your bones.
Yeah.
But, you know, on the other hand, it's not like, and I mean, it's hard because once you're that age, you don't have, you know, decisions and choices over your own body.
Right. And I think for me, honestly, I think, yes, there needs to be a lot of questions asked and a lot of figuring out before this point. Like,
Right.
you desperately need to know, is your child trans?
Right.
And you have to get them on puberty blockers when it's acceptable, not
Right.
like super early.
Well, and I feel like if you do it early, it needs to be because they absolutely cannot stand the way they're living. Like, it has to be medically necessary, you know, like, because if they can express their true selves, you know, until it's safe for them to get on hormones, you know, in the way that they want,
Yeah.
then they shouldn't need, you know, puberty blockers.
Right. I just give all praise to the transgender women that never, like, went through male puberty and grew a beard. Like, there's just, because, you know, there's some men out there that can't grow a beard.
Right.
And some of these men that are transgender women, I feel like so jealous of them because it's like, you didn't have to go through that. You didn't have to get expensive laser hair removal surgeries or anything like that because you were already blessed with a smooth face. But I also believe that there definitely needs to be an age limit for how old you should be able to put
Right.
a kid on hormones, because you don't want to do it like when they're like, you know, 10 or 11.
Right. Well, you need it to line up with their actual puberty.
Yeah.
But you also have to remember that, you know, children's brains aren't fully developed. Your brain's not fully developed until you're way older. Like, you know, for males, it's like 25.
Right.
You know, and like, it's all about the education of the kid, and, you know, therapy would be a huge thing in their development at that point if they decided that they needed to go on hormones at a young age.
Yeah, and, you know, therapy is a huge thing, and that's one of the things that, like, places like endocrinology and places that do surgeries require you to be on or be in therapy for so long before they'll even consider seeing you.
Well, and I think it's interesting that they try to bring up kids, but it's rare for a child to get puberty blockers. From a medical aspect, it's not healthy, and it's rare for a physician to put their license on the line by prescribing a young child hormones.
Yeah.
Most of the time, they'll say, come back when you turn 18.
Right, and to say, like, between the ages of 15 to 18, in my eyes, I mean, I know by law, legally, that is considered a child, but to me, like, that's not a child. Like, if that's what you're trying to claim, like, that's not a child. That's a teenager and someone who is not old enough to make their own decisions, but can make their own decisions of who they are and who they want to be. And that, I think, is all 100% reasonable.
Yeah, well, and it's a weird time at that age because you're just supposed to just, like, you know, put your head down and get through what you're doing.
Yeah.
And get through the last little bit of your teenage years. That way you can do whatever you want.
Right. And
I don't disagree with making people, you know, kids wait until they're 18 to medically transition.
Right.
You know, I don't disagree.
I think it's very acceptable to allow them to social transition.
Oh, definitely. Social transitioning, you know, you have to do that. but on medically speaking, I don't think you should until you're 18.
Right, because then you can really be like, oh, this isn't what I want, or this is definitely what I want.
Yeah. Well, and there's way less hoops you got to jump through, and at least you can spend that time collecting all your notes from your doctors and from your therapists and building relationships, and then they can support you in that way and be like, I went through this with them from a young age, and now they're finally able to do it, and with my, I have confidence in this. Yeah,
and it's like I've got like 5 years of therapy under my belt, so I have all the notes and stuff I need prepared for any procedures, But I also feel like I wished I could have started like puberty blockers at a young age, because that would have prevented me from having to go through like the laser hair removal.
That's true.
And so that's why I think at a certain young age, yes, it is very helpful to get it at the right age that it's acceptable, to where you can prevent them going through the hormonal treatment they don't want to go through in puberty.
Right.
And let them go through the one that they identify with.
Right. Yeah, well, and I think it also kind of comes down to, because from a medical standpoint, thinning of your bones, that can last for a lifetime, once that happens.
Right.
So then you have to choose, do I want to have to deal with brittle bones and live the life I want, or do I want to put it off for a few years and not deal with it? Right,
true. It's kind of like playing roulette at that point. I'm sure it would have been hell, and I'm glad that I've done it now rather than earlier, but I would have loved to have transitioned back in high school, but I know that it would have been hell, and people are so much more rude in high school.
Like, if I had been in a less, because I lived in a really, a more conservative town than LeGrand.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. And so, if I had been in a better environment, I would have loved to transition at that early of an age, because, it would have just given me more confidence and all sorts of shit. But also, you can't, but...
Right, but it gave you more time to really hone yourself in.
Yeah, but, waiting until you're 18 or, older or whatever... Right. Gives you enough time to experience life and make sure that you're making the right decisions for yourself.
And there was just many things I wanted to do when I was in high school, which was transition and join. There were some women's sports I really wanted to play, and I can tell you right now that there would have been a huge debate about that if I would have transitioned, because they would have had huge problems with it.
Well, where I went to school, if you were a female, they didn't even consider you for football.
Wow.
One person who was in my grade, one female went and joined football, and they kept her on the bench. They didn't play her.
Oh, jeez.
So she was getting hazed, too. Oh, God. Because they were like, well, if you're going to be with us, you're going to work out with us, you're going to do all this hard shit. And then they didn't even play her. So she didn't stay on the team.
Right. And we had someone like that here that actually played for our team, which was amazing, that at least we're acceptable to that extent. Right. And it's I feel like there should be more feminine sports open to men. Because, with basketball, we have a boys basketball team and a girls basketball team.
Well, and that's even at, state, too.
Right, and it's also we have a women's soccer team and a men's soccer team. So why is it we can't have a girls volleyball team and a boys volleyball team?
Right, yeah, because there are men that love playing that.
Yeah. That was one of the things I wanted to do, but was kind of held back on, because I was like, well, there's not a boys team, and I know they would freak out if I came out as trans and tried to join the women's team. Not because I want to try to overpower anybody. It's this is who I am, and this is what I want to play.
And it's just fun for you.
Yeah.
And I mean, that's the point of sports, is to be competitive anyway.
Yeah.
Because everybody wants to be that, that star player.
Oh, yeah.
Not to mention the spiritual entities that are taking advantage of every time.
Oh, that's what I want to say too, is I wanted to talk about the spiritual entities that they mentioned. I'm sure there is in some way. Not once have I ever been talking to by a spirit.
Right.
And been you need to be trans.
Right.
It's what?
Demons. They're talking about demons.
Yeah, they're whispering in your ear like,
accept your true identity
Right.
that I just told you.
And I mean, I've been told this before, like I've told people like, this is who I am, I need to transition, and they're like, well, are you sure it's from God? And I'm like, I'm sure God doesn't want to see me sad and upset.
Right.
I'm sure God wants to see me happy.
Yeah.
And as like being in this mix right now is preventing me from fully loving God because I'm not happy with myself.
Well, it's like when people try to tell you that that's not the way God intended your life, how do they know? Are they God?
Right. How do they?
They're not you, and they're not God.
Right.
So they're trying to, force their opinion on you, which is the thing they hate the most.
Mm-hmm.
In the beauty pageants where they win.
Oh, that's a funny topic I did want to talk about. I just gotta say, I think it is fucking hilarious if a trans person is able to beat regular women in a beauty pageant. It's like, that has nothing to do with overpowering or nothing. That just means...
That's just talent.
Yeah, like, you need to step up your game. If a biological man who is now transgender is beating women, that's got to say something.
Right, exactly. Well, I think it scares them because, a lot of the time with people who are far down their transition, they can't tell.
Yeah.
And it's scary to them.
Right, and it's like...
They self-identify themselves at 6 or 7 years old when one day they want to be Batman and the next day they want to be an airplane. And they have no idea of what sexuality is. And we go along with that, and they have no chance of entering into that. But let me ask you a question.
Yeah. No. Yeah, kids want to be Batman, and then they want to be an airplane.
Right.
But I can guarantee you're not going to find a 6 or 7 year old that's on puberty blockers. Like, that's just ridiculous.
Right, yeah, you're not gonna find that at all.
Yeah.
And I think it's wild. Like, that's what they're trying to claim, is that kids that age are the ones that are being thrown on this.
And it's completely blown out of proportion.
And it's not. And a lot of what they're seeing too is, there are parents that they see, their boy, they see him in a dress and he's dressing up, and they say, fuck it, you know what, if that's what you're gonna wear today, that's fine. And they'll let them go out to the grocery store or something in this little princess dress, like, sorry guys, there's somebody outside. But like, no, it's like, you see them going out in the grocery store in a princess dress, it's just because that's what they want to wear that day. And that's totally fine. Like, let them wear what they want to wear. But if it's just that one instance, then that's fine.
Right.
But if it's like, if it's more than an instance, then maybe they are trans, or maybe they just prefer that type of clothing.
Well, and then these people want to demonize the parent, who's letting them express themselves fully, and they're like, oh, this child's on puberty blockers, and they're fucking not.
Right, and it's like, oh, it's the parent's fault, and then they take it to extreme lengths with, like we talked about, with calling CPS and shit, and being like, this child's being abused.
Right.
This child isn't being abused. This child is being loved for who they are and treated with decency and respect.
How do you identify? So be careful. That's a trick question. Because we cannot self-identify. We compare ourselves to those on Facebook and TikTok and Instagram and YouTube. We are in a soup of toxic influences. Every YouTube video, meme, story, movie, narrative has an agenda. The only one who can truly identify us is the one who paid the price for our sin. Do you see how...
That's kind of like what I was talking about. Is, the only people who can decide your identity is who made you and you. Yeah. And yet they're trying to tell you you can't.
Right, and they're also saying that that memes have an agenda too.
Oh yeah. You're in a soup of toxic whatever.
And it's like memes are supposed to be a light, kind of a happy thing to make you laugh.
It's like the fucking cartoons that were in the newspaper.
Right.
Political
cartoons and stuff. It's like, it's almost like saying that memes are influencing us, and it's like,
Memes are what distract us from the fact that
Right.
our society is collapsing and we're dead inside.
Right, and that's what the whole point of a meme is
Right.
to sometimes make fun of that.
Yeah.
Like, you're like, oh, you're a sad, depressed person, here's a meme for you.
Right, exactly.
And it's like, not once have I looked at a meme and been like, transgender, maybe that's me.
You just look at this fucking meme and it has nothing to do with like trans people, and then you just go, I'm a trans.
Yep,
That's what
I'm
I
trans.
am.
That's what I am.
Yeah.
I'm one of those trans people
Yep.
now.
Or sin. Do you see how self-identification is not feasible and disastrous, destructive?
I feel like it's
First
the
of all,
opposite.
it's not only destructive, but it keeps you chasing what you think your identity is. If I say that I'm a male and I'm going to change myself to look like that, I will be chasing that the rest of my life. I will be on hormones the rest of my life. I'll have to have surgeries the rest of my life. And then I'll have to have corrective surgeries the rest of my life. Because many of these people who are doing this they're not chasing something, they're running away. It opens up, as you can see, we're at the point now where
Bold of you to assume, first off, that transgender people want to be on hormones or want to have surgeries, because
Right.
some don't.
Yeah, some are just at that point where
Yeah.
there are some people that are passing
Right.
and they're fine with the way they look.
Right.
And they can,
They're-
pass.
yeah.
Or there's other people, that embrace their like beards and stuff
Right.
and identify as women, and they're
Right.
totally fine with that.
Yeah.
And then the fact that they say that you will be chasing this the rest of your life, to an extent, is correct. Yes, you do have to be on hormones for
You
rest of your life to just maintain the effects.
Right.
And, maintain the way you look.
Well, either way, like, you're on hormones for your life, but, at that point you're choosing which ones you want to be on.
Right. And then the fact that they say you're chasing surgeries the rest of your life.
Yeah,
is
you're not going to have surgeries for the rest of your life.
No, that's not going to be something.
And you're only getting corrective surgeries if something medically is wrong. with
Right. Yeah. And it's like, if you don't like something about you, then yeah, you're getting
you. Yeah.
some sort of surgery like that, but it's not something you're chasing for the rest of your life.
Right.
Now, if they're talking about the newly done research where they're starting to do uterus transplants, then yeah, somebody
Right.
might be chasing that the rest of their life, because who knows when that's actually
Exactly.
going to roll out
Right.
for trans
Yeah.
females. And if, that rolls out in my lifetime, you bet your ass I'm going to
Right.
sign my name up on a list
Mhm.
to get one done. Because who wouldn't want to be pregnant?
Right.
Like someone in my position
Yeah.
that's never had that before.
Mm-hmm.
It sucks a little bit that I can't pick and choose not to have a period, but
Right.
if I could just have a baby in my tummy, then that'd be fine. But dealing with all the period cramps and stuff doesn't sound too fun. But it's all in the experience. It's all about the human experience.
we're using cross-sex hormones and puberty blockers to change who we are.
The one thing that drives me nuts about this whole video is the term they use for hormones, cross-sex hormones.
Mm.
I get that is a term for it. It just drives me nuts. It's like, just call it hormones.
Oh, yeah.
Like, why cross-sex hormones? Like, it's just weird.
Chasing after something that we think we've identified ourselves as. Or running away from something that we don't want to be. It's very destructive. To the point of, having surgeries to remove body parts. And to those of us who don't struggle with this, it all seems so...
Now, I do like that they said remove body parts and not just cut off.
Right.
But at the same time, it's not really removing
It's
it.
not.
It's
Like-
just reusing it.
Well, and they are presumably okay with when women get breast reductions due to medical reasons.
Right.
That's the same thing.
Right. Or we're fine with women getting their breasts enlarged.
Yeah.
Or
Oh, they're super fine with that. They're just like,
Or-
oh, I'm totally for that.
right. Or they're fine with women getting lip injections or any other
lipo
reconstruction surgery on their faces.
Yeah.
And it's like, well, if you're fine with that, then how come you're so against...
That's changing.
Yeah, you're changing the body that way. And then it's like, you know, all the secret Christian males out there or conservative males that are secretly into the whole transgender porn scene.
Mm-hmm.
It's like, yeah, it's like you claim that you hate us so much, but yet in your private home you're watching this stuff every night. It's like, how do you really feel about it?
Right.
You know?
So ridiculous. But it's really a big deal. And there are some of us who really struggle with this in our society. But I remember Josh saying to the parents that you need to ask a lot of questions, because the fact that they want to be another sex.
I feel like that is important. That's the one thing I did agree with that they said is like ask a lot of questions.
Well, you got to ask a lot of questions no matter what.
Right.
When you have kids.
Right.
You know.
And I mean, you're not just asking a lot of questions about gender identity.
Right.
Like, your kids will come to you with a million questions.
Mm-hmm.
And like, you got to ask them all sorts of things, you know?
Yeah.
Like, you know, and it's like, I think it's good to ask questions, you know? Like, you know, if my future kids don't end up being like trans or anything in the LGBT community and they have questions about it, I'll be like, yeah, I'll tell you what you want to know, and I'll ask questions like, how come you want to know that? Or like, you know.
Yeah, well, if you're a parent and you are like, you know, like if you're just kids, just like this, you know, kid that's not LGBT or whatever the fuck, and you don't ask your kid questions, I would worry about your parenting style, because you need to know like who they're around, what they're doing, what the people they're around are doing, you know.
Like, you know, like say for instance, like if my kid came home from school with a flyer or some sort of homework that said teaching about the LGBTQ, I would ask him like, well, how do you feel about it, buddy? Like, what's your thoughts on it? Even though he's a kid, but like, I'd still ask him like, well, what do you think? And he's like, well, I really just don't know what it means. And then I would sit down, you know, and have a talk with him.
Right.
And the main thing for my future kids is I want to teach love, not hate. Like, be like, it's okay to disagree, but you got to have respect for people.
Right. You have to respect everybody.
It's like, you don't have to agree with it, just as long as you respect them, that's what counts.
Treat them like a person.
Yeah. Jeez, Snoopy.
That was crazy.
I thought it was
you
gonna...
got that on video.
Oh, I probably did. It's probably going to come... I thought it was going to come back over this way.
No, he caught it twice, basically.
Does not mean that it is related to gender dysphoria. They don't know really. And you don't know enough to assume. They might be just depressed about something else completely and having pubescent anxiety.
You're not transgender,
There's
you're
so
just
many
depressed.
people that are
You're
just
just
they don't
depressed.
feel like they don't
Because
belong.
I told you
And
you're
they're
not
so-
transgender.
And society says you don't belong because you're not who you're supposed to be, so you need to change. It might be because they had trauma in their life. You know, abuse causes people to not want to be who they are because they don't want that abuse anymore. Many women choose the...
I mean, telling someone that they can't be transgender is also a form of abuse.
Right. And, I mean, yes, I do agree there is trauma related with some trans people. And that's why they become, you know, transgender or lesbian or whatnot, because they've dealt with trauma and they just don't trust, like, they just don't trust men, you know. And I feel like, especially with instances of sexual abuse, causes a lot of that because it makes them want to gain back power and be able to feel powerful over their abuser. But that's very little reasoning behind being transgender. A lot of times it is actual legitimate feelings of like, this is who I'm supposed to be. This is the way I was born. I really want to be this way. And it's not just because they're depressed.
Mm-hmm.
It's like what the fuck? It's like, oh, you're not transgender. You're just depressed. Here,
You're
take
not
some
gay,
medication.
You're just depressed.
Yeah.
Be a zombie.
Be a zombie, yeah. Live like the rest of us, god damn it. You're just depressed.
Yeah.
So it's fucking nuts.
The homosexual lifestyle because they've been abused and they don't want that anymore. They don't trust men anymore. You can go online and get a referral and a prescription within 30 minutes without anybody even seeing you. In fact, many psychologists and psychiatrists cannot do anything but affirm you if you feel like you have this issue. They'll lose their job. And if you pay them a couple $100, you'll get a letter that will refer you for surgery. It's not very hard. The pipeline is very big, and they're flushing people through it. So these cross-sex hormones are very dangerous. They cause strokes, they cause heart issues, they cause bone.
This is interesting because they said that you can just get like your hormone therapy in 30 minutes, your referral and
Right.
everything in 30 minutes.
Yeah, which is not true.
That's very incorrect.
Right, and I tried to tell that to another Christian person, and they said, oh no, that's definitely true. And it's like, it doesn't happen within 30 minutes.
It's not true.
Now,
You can't even get a normal doctor's appointment within 30 minutes of
Right.
calling.
oh yeah.
You have to wait, like I have to wait 2 or 3 months because my doctor's so booked out.
And they said, you can just go online and get it? No.
No, because they make you go to a therapist online.
And even if you try to pay them, like they said, like, oh, you pay them a couple $100, they'll do this for you. And it's like, not really,
Yeah.
not right on the spot.
Well, and I didn't have to bribe my
Right.
therapist to write my letter for top
Yeah.
surgery.
Right, it's like, here, write this letter or else.
Like, here's $300, here's a bribe, here. No, that's
Yeah.
not how that happened.
And I will say, it wasn't 30 minutes, but with my ex, I'll say that was very fast. Like,
Yeah, well, he got lucky in finding the doctor.
yeah,
he
that was
found.
very, like, to me, scarily fast. I was
Right.
like, that seems like a bit too much for me.
Right. Like, he didn't go through any fucking therapy.
Yeah, it's like, I want to do this. See, I like that my current doctor is doing this the correct way instead
Right.
of just being like, oh, here you go.
Yeah.
Like, because I want to be monitored and make sure everything is being handled responsibly
Right,
rather
exactly.
than just giving me whatever dosage and saying, all right, have fun.
Were they even making him do blood work and shit?
They were.
Okay, good.
Yeah,
Because
they
that's
were.
what I worry about.
Yeah, and it's like, what the hell?
Right.
Yeah, so I'm just like, okay, like, I don't want that for me, but
Well, and then on the topic of where we just paused it, is like, this person was like, oh, it can cause heart problems.
Oh, yeah.
Which is what I'm dealing with right now. It's not caused by transitioning. Heart problems run in my family.
right. Yeah.
With the males, but not so much the females. It's a different tract for the females.
Yeah, and-
which I ended up getting both.
Yeah, and what I researched, it said that this happens, or not happens, but can happen. It was like a can happen thing. It wasn't like this is absolutely going to happen to you.
Right. Yeah. Well, and it really just depends on your genetics.
Right.
Because, like, with my family, my brother had his first heart attack at 38 years old, and my dad's similar.
Yeah.
And it's because their blood is so thick.
Oh, yeah.
And so, transitioning from female, I was almost like anemic. And then, a few years on testosterone and my blood is thick.
Yeah.
But it's because of the genetics that my family carries.
Right. And this seems more, more of that fear mongering because
Right.
they're throwing out all these diseases. The parents are definitely like, oh, we definitely don't want this for our kid if it's going to cause this.
Right.
Like, we don't want to risk that.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like, well, it says can cause. It doesn't say it will cause.
Yeah.
It's just a potential thing that could happen.
Right.
Cause bone density loss or not even developing it, autoimmune disease, all kinds of stuff. In fact, those people who transition, the suicidality goes up at about 8 to 10 years after the transition. There are no studies that go beyond a year or 2 years. This situation is something that is obviously getting out of control.
Now, this part here is the one that I did like the most like fact checking and research for, because obviously the suicide rate does not go up.
Right.
But it just depends on the situation, because like we talked about earlier, there are those people that think they are trans.
Right.
And it's actually what's not for them, and they don't realize it at the time, and they go through this whole process.
Yeah, but that's not a transgender issue. That's a mental health problem.
And they realize, oh, well, shit, I fucked up. And then there's people that take extreme lengths, but not everybody does that.
Right.
And it's not a 100% thing of like, oh, we're just going to kill ourselves now because we're now trans and we're stuck in this body.
Yeah.
And it's like, no, it doesn't happen that way. There's ways to detransition, and I've heard several people tell me it's irreversible and it can't be done.
It's not irreversible. But I also don't think that they take into account how much therapy is included with transition.
Oh, yeah.
Like you are watched from the day you start until whenever it ends.
It's not like a, oh, here you go thing.
Yeah.
Like, now you're off on your own.
Right.
It's like they watch you constantly and make sure your mental health is in check and make sure all these things are definitely 100% in check. So I had asked people, like people in the LGBTQ and people that are Christian, like I had asked them the same question to see what they think. And I said, do you think transitioning affects a person's mental health negatively rather than positively, or not at all? And do you think more openness, love, and acceptance would lower LGBTQ suicidal rates? And so I asked like both sides, and these are all what I've got from that. One person says, let's see. One person says, actually, the rates of that drop because you're finally happy to be aligned with who you are, what you identify as, which I agree with. I mean, I think since I've been living my true authentic self when I can, helps my mental health 100% better. I'll say what lowers it is when I have to take the makeup off and go back to living as my male self. It's like, why the fuck do I have to do this? Why can't I just keep it on?
Right.
You know? It's like, it sucks that I have to still hide myself, but with me starting these new procedures and stuff, hopefully I won't have to do that for very much longer. But another one says, for me personally, being more of my authentic self has helped me a lot, because before I would have to hide that I liked wearing feminine clothes and I was transgender because I didn't know what my family would think about it. But when I told my family about it, everything, and they said they support me on everything, it made me very happy about things. So now I can be my authentic self without having to hide it. And then this other person says, LOL, that's totally bullshit. Most trans people I know are much less depressed and more stable on hormones and transitioning than not. There are plenty of actual research studies to back that up. And it said suicidal thoughts have almost stopped completely for me since starting HRT. 1 year and 7 months ago, the things that give me major anxiety and depression are now external factors like job, financial stress. No longer am I tortured prisoner in my own body. The biggest cause of anxiety now is hatred and dangerous attacks on trans people spurred on by churches and religion everywhere. And so I don't think, I mean, I know it comes from churches too, but I don't think it's all just churches. I think it's from everywhere in the world that doesn't accept it. They're like, we have to stop this. Like, it's becoming too huge of a movement. And it just gets it out quicker in the churches. Like, the churches are spreading the word and news a lot faster. And I just don't agree with the whole thing that the suicide rates go up. I think they go down significantly.
Yeah.
Now, the suicide rates go up if it's prolonged, like they're not able to live who they are.
Yeah.
And they keep being forced to be shoved down in the closet. Because I remember in 2013, there was a point where I was ready to leave and commit suicide. I was like, I just can't do this if I'm not going to be able to live who I want to be.
Right.
And so, like, thankfully a friend talked me out of it, but I was just like, I'm done. Like,
Yeah.
I can't do this anymore. Like, I'm tired of hiding who I am.
Right. Yeah.
And it wasn't until I got my own private clothes and started dressing in private that helped me significantly, rather than just not doing it at all.
Yeah, and that's the problem with not being in a very, supportive environment, is it affects your mental health negatively.
Yeah, it definitely affects the mental health negatively. Where is the recording here?
What did you do?
The recording's right there, thank God. I was like, when I tell you my heart almost just dropped right there, I was like, where'd the recording go? I swear to God, if we haven't been recording.
I was going to be like, I'm done.
Right.
I'm leaving.
I would just
I
like
can't
leave at that point. But yeah, no. So that was pretty much all that mattered in that video. The last of it didn't even care. It was just more blah, 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 blah.
Yeah.
Sounded like Charlie Brown.
Yeah.
Blah, 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 blah. But yeah, no. Yeah, so that video was a bit wild and crazy. So that's, I guess that's pretty much the podcast.
Oh, yeah. Are we at the end of that video?
Yeah, we're
Okay,
at the end of that
good.
video. That's what I'm talking about.
Good.
Like,
I am so, drained from
oh, I
watching
know.
that.
Yeah, that video is... and I cut it down, too, because it was, way longer.
That's crazy.
If I would have had to go through the whole
So
video...
it's like the whole sermon.
Yeah, if I would have had to go through the whole sermon, that would have been crazy. But I only cut out the important parts of what we were actually talking about, the transgender thing, because I didn't want the whole video in there, because the rest of it just didn't make any sense.
Right.
And it's like... I was so sad that the boat thing wasn't in there, because I was like, that's a huge part of it. It's like, why would you compare this to a boat that
Right.
is, or a car wanting to be a boat? That doesn't have anything to do with it.
Right.
So, but yeah, so I think that's the podcast. We'll go ahead and end it there. I know you're emotionally drained, and your wife's probably going to be hangry texting you.
Oh, yeah. Definitely.
So
I'm going to go.
yeah, you should probably go and feed your gremlin.
Yep.
Don't come after me for calling you a gremlin on my podcast, but yeah, guys, that's my podcast. My name's Chadwick Baum, and thanks for watching.